Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. So welcome to this wonderful, amazing webinar sponsored by the Center for Human Relations and Community Studies. And I just want to say a few words of introduction. I'm imagining you've all read the material on the webinar, so I'm not going to repeat any of that. I'm just going to say a few personal things. So first of all, we have with us Judith Katz, whom I've just met for the first time. We chatted a bit. We're both from New York City. She from Queens, me from Manhattan. And I was looking at some of her background because I've not had an opportunity to talk with Judith before. And I wanted to read you something, which is a very brief review of a book that she wrote in 1978, or was published in 1978. So for many of you, that isn't a distant memory because you weren't even around. For some of you, you may have been. So the book was entitled White Awareness, a Handbook for Anti-Racism Training, 1978. And the book review says, white awareness has been created out of a personal and professional struggle and is designed to help whites understand and come to grips with personal, cultural, and institutional racism. The author was a child of refugees from Hitler's Germany. She was further influenced by the social movements in the US during the 1960s. She has a vision of equality and a commitment to combating the pathology of racism. And it goes on. The last sentence, her practical orientation makes her concerned with action rather than self-indulgent or energy-wasting guilt. So I was really kind of taken by that. And then I read further in her bio, and I realized that in 1984, Judith has published a lot since then as well, but in 1984, she published an autobiography. And the autobiography is entitled, No Fairy Godmothers, No Magic Wands, The Healing Process After Rape. So I am excited to get to know more about this amazing woman. And not only do we have this webinar, but we have coming up, which if you've read the material that's coming out on the center website, there will be a 5-day or 6-day lab, a human interaction lab, and developing the organizational and personal self in May 2022 in person, hopefully without masks. So we'll get to see each other in person at that time. So thank you, Judith, for joining us and offering your wisdom in this time. I want to turn to my knowledge and knowing of Fred Miller. And I don't know if Fred's here yet. Fred's in New York. He's here.
He's almost here.
Oh, almost here. Fred's in New York City, and being from New York City, I understand that whenever you say you're going to be at a place at a particular point in time, you're most likely to be off by about a half hour. So Fred is a passionate person. I've known him over the past couple of years as we have had dialogues about putting together workshops and programs built on the National Training Laboratories model, the High Lab, Human Interaction Lab, and the lab that both Judith and Fred have been involved with for quite some time of developing the organizational and personal self. So we were planning to run this in 2019 or so, and then things happened, and of course the world went tilt with COVID. And so we've been working and talking in this webinar series that is being offered. There are 3 sessions. Hope you participate in all of them. Was the product of our conversations to kind of get people familiar with this work. And so Fred is not only a person of passion, but a person of hope. And I'll put in the Khalil Jameson website location so you can have that. But in a post that was put up after that fateful day, that horrific day, May 25th, 2020, and some of you may have that date marked in your memory, Fred put up this message. It says, a note from Fred Miller: when I can't take another step, I think of the power of us. Someone handcuffs you and puts their knee on your throat and you die. Someone thinks your apartment is their apartment and kills you. Someone is driving their car and is stopped and killed. Someone is playing with a toy gun and is killed. Someone is jogging in the middle of the street unarmed and is killed. I am so tired. When I am tired, when I have said the same statement to another person that I've said hundreds and hundreds of times in my 48 years of doing this work, when I miss my family and friends, when I wonder, does it really matter? Do I really matter? Does anyone really care? When I look at TV and see the underbelly of the United States and other places around the world, when I feel like an old black man trying to swim up Niagara Falls, when I just feel like an old man, when I think I can't take another step, I think of you. I think of all of the people Judith and I have met and worked with through the years, people who care, people who want to make a difference, who are making a difference. And that thought, that very thought, that one thought gives me strength, courage, a vision, a feeling of love. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn this over. And so please welcome Fred Miller and Judith Katz. Thank you.
I'll be able to talk when I stop crying. Thank
Your
you.
words, Fred.
Thank you. I know I haven't read them in a while. Trying to get this light from my head. Thank you for that. And Jim, you've been a great partner and a great person to work with, and I just really want to be extremely appreciative. And like I said in that essay, there's so many people who have blessed my life, and so many co-conspirators out in the world, some known and some unknown to me. Many are most unknown to me, but it's a us and it's a we that's going to change this world. And it's a us and a we that's gotten it this far. And I just have an undying belief and faith that humankind will prevail. And that's why I do this work. So thank you. And meeting people like you, Jim, and others that we have met in Maryland and others is just reinforced for me that hope and that faith. I want to thank people for joining us. Really appreciate it. I was kind of running from one event to the other. And so getting my mind moved around, but working with credible organizations. I have a privileged life in the sense that I have a chance to work with people who are all trying to make a difference in the world. And that is appreciated. So I'm Fred Miller, partnering with Judith Katz here. And we're in the process of changing the world, working with you and others in this thing with Jim and others, building sustainable. Oh, let's go to the first page of the slide. Building successful interactions. It's big. It's major. How do we have successful interactions with each other? How do we make that work? How do we have interactions that are healthy? There's so many examples of bad and ugly. How do we have successful interactions that help people thrive, be bigger, be better, be their better selves, their best selves, versus pulling each other down. So building successful interactions, why inclusion and diversity skills are critical to organizational and personal growth. Our focus in our practice historically has been on organizations. And so a lot of our talking and our examples will come out of that, but we've also been very involved with personal growth, both of which labs we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing a personal growth lab called the Human Interaction Lab. And we're also going to be doing advanced personal growth lab called DOPS, Developing the Organization and Personal Self. So we're excited to be a part of this. We're excited about being part of this series, these webinars. We're excited to be doing some labs in Montreal next year. And we're excited to be associated with all the organizations and people that are making this happen. So being your best self webinar series, what could be better? Okay, why don't I turn it over to Judith? Judith, you could introduce yourself.
First, I'm out of breath from what Jim said, so let me start there. I could be done right now, but I'm glad to see everybody here. I'm so excited, and as we were just waiting for everyone to join us, you know, Jim and I talked about how important right now it is for us to really, in some ways, slow down and really focus on the critical skills that we need to really engage across our differences and to be more effective. And we know that we're in such an important time. So let's move to the next slide. So just wanted to share a little bit about what we're hoping to accomplish today. And, you know, we know people are coming in from many different places, many different backgrounds and experiences, but we do want to level set a little bit about some frameworks that we use for understanding inclusion and diversity, and even what those words mean, because I think we talk a lot about these issues, but we don't necessarily really talk about what's important in terms of getting the groundwork that everybody understands. And then we want to look at what differences make a difference in your work and your life. Because there are many dimensions of difference, and depending on our own social identities, different differences will have a greater impact and have a different impact on us. So we want to talk a little bit about differences that make a difference. And then some about competencies. What are the competencies needed to be effective, whether it's as a leader or a team member, as you work across differences and create inclusive teams? And, you know, one of the things that's interesting is really getting clear about what are the strengths I bring? What are those areas that I really need to lean into and learn from? So that's one of the things that we will hopefully be sharing with you and having you share with each other. We also would encourage you to put your cameras on because we're going to be doing some connecting. And so it's great to see people's faces and to see who's here as well. So Fred, I think you're up next.
Yeah. So a couple more comments about us. So we're the Kahlua Jameson Consulting Group. We've been around for 51 years, 5-1. We're located in Troy, New York, across the river from Albany, so halfway between Montreal and New York City. And we focus on helping human beings be human inside of organizations. And one of the things we have a reputation around is around inclusion and diversity and equity. But it's really about creating organizations, creating human systems where humans can be here. So we want to we'll give you a chance to disconnect. One of the things that's critical about inclusion and diversity is saying hello. We say inclusion starts at hello. If nobody speaks to you and nobody says hi to you where you live, when you come out of your door, then you don't feel included. Inclusion is people speaking to one another. So we're going to start with just some breakouts just for 6 minutes to give people a chance to just say hi to each other and say your name and say your organization and one way diversity is important to you. Just as we start our connecting before Judith and I go more into the presentation. So we'll break out into those groups, again, just 6 minutes. And then we'll come back together and then we'll start sharing some of what we're seeing and we're learning, talk about some of the definitions that are important, something about the social identity groups that are critical that we need to understand and get to learn better as the diversity of this world becomes more and more visible. It was always there, but it's becoming more and more visible and more known and having more voice. And so how do we learn about that and where are we in the process? Okay, let's go to the small groups. Vera, you want to just say hi before we disappear?
Yeah.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Veranik. I am the client partner here with Khalil Jameson Consulting Group. So I will be doing all the back-end work during this presentation, but it's so nice to see so many people show up for this. And we have 2 more webinars coming up, which we'll tell you a bit more about later on. Yeah, so that's about it. Get the groups open.
Let's go. Welcome back.
Nice.
Nice to see Bison in the picture back there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Makes it real. I love it. I appreciate that. Better than walls.
Right. Yes.
Well, to be honest, that's a spillover from a Kairos blanket exercise on Indigenous culture, and it was one of the backgrounds they provided, and I had no idea when I signed into this that would still be there from my last session. So it was kind of an accident, but appropriate for today. So
A lovely accident. Thank you. Welcome back, and thanks for turning your cameras on. Appreciate it. Thank you. Welcome back. Just want to hear from a couple of people one way diversity is important to you. So let's hear from 3 people. Just unmute yourself and start talking. What's one way that diversity is important to you? And you might, other people might, if you have time, put some of your answers in chat. We can have those as we refer and think about this going forward. So if you could put your response in chat, that would be great. Let's hear from 3 people. Just unmute and talk.
So, okay, so my name is Carla Marrouche. So I think diversity is very important to me because I'm in recruitment and I love to hire, I love to have that diversity mindset when hiring. So I can influence the decision maker and we can have more upper management from diversity members, which I've been having. So
great. Thank you. Thanks for going first. Someone else?
I could jump in.
I could go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Are you sure? Okay.
Go.
Diversity is important. I don't like the video doesn't work for the record. It's not because I don't want to show my face, but I have a dissociative identity and I work with people who have schizophrenia in a residence and I do public artwork with the community.
Wow.
And so diversity is really important with me in Montréal Nord. So I get to see immigrants in different locations and different backgrounds, cultural, mental health. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding because we don't either have the right vocabulary or the right cultural background to understand each other. And I think that there's a lot of discussion that needs to be had so that we can all treat each other as equally human.
Wow. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you. Let's hear from one more person.
All right, so I guess I'll jump in now. So I'm a teacher in the field of social services and a former social worker. So certainly diversity plays a huge role in the work that my students have to learn about and when they do their field placements. In addition, I do workshops, consulting for corporations and team building, and certainly they're diverse groups usually, and so it's important to understand, how communication works in diverse groups.
Wow, thank you. We're going to keep moving. We have one more team member that I didn't introduce before. Shame on me. Tara, you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Tara Whittle, and I work here in Troy, New York, where our Khalil Jameson offices are. Been with the firm for 22 years and a couple of weeks. And I'm Fred and Judith's key partner on public labs and have attended both an HI lab, not done by Fred and Judith, but by MTL and DOPS. And I can personally testify that they are amazing, valuable experiences. So I'm going to put in my own plug for that right now.
Thanks. And Judith.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I loved, Tammy, what you just said about the needing a shared vocabulary, because I think that one of the challenges we have is that we often talk past each other and don't even know what we're talking about when we talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, all those issues. So we wanted to just spend just a few minutes. Vera, if you please put up the slides. Just kind of talking a little bit about some of the different definitions that we use as a way to kind of ground us around that. And also one of the things I'm aware of is that often these words are used interchangeably. And often what we don't understand is that each of these have different strategies attached to them. And often what we talk about is diversity and inclusion like they're the same thing, as opposed to really understanding that they're different and they need different strategies, as well as equity and compliance. So they're not all the same, and I'll just spend a moment. And again, you'll have these slides, so we'll be sending those out to everyone. When I think about compliance, it kind of open doors, but it's really only the laws that prohibit discrimination. Obviously, they may be different from the United States, from Canada. Even in the United States, different states have different laws. But all that means is basically you're going to be in compliance. It's almost like, if I think about safety, it's those things that you must do to keep an organization safe, or that those laws that you must follow. And so they're really, many people think that affirmative action in some organizations is kind of like doing the work of diversity. It's not. It's just really adhering to the laws that's expected in terms of addressing discrimination and making sure that you're not discriminating against different groups of people. In the United States, at least, and not all groups are covered in compliance or in our laws. And so in many places, LGBTQ are not covered in terms of where you can fire people or discriminate against people. And some of the issues you talked about around people with disabilities and different kinds of disabilities or abilities are maybe not covered as well. So there's a whole question about compliance, but that is just really kind of, in the United States at least, it's around government contracts, is what you have to do for government contracts. But that's it. It's basically staying within the law, really making sure that you're responding to that. Then we move into diversity, and diversity, as we define it, is the range of social identity groups that comprise an organization and our societies. And so having the diversity that you need to be able to respond to customers, to be able to respond to what the workforce looks like, to be able to respond to meeting needs is part of when we think about hiring more diverse workforce. And leveraging that diversity is one thing to have the diversity, but it's another thing, are we leveraging it? Are we seeking out those different views? Are we bringing people in to hear what they have to say from their social identity group perspective? Are we using their experiences to really understand that I, as a white woman, might see it differently than Fred as a black man? And how that may be differently. Think about age differences. Are we really capitalizing on and leveraging those differences? But one of the downsides about leveraging diversity is that sometimes I only get seen for my diversity. I only get seen for being in that identity group and may not be seen for some of the other things that I bring as well. So diversity is critical and leveraging that diversity, but there can be a problem if we only focus on the diversity that people bring and not the fullness of who they are. The next definition I want to go to is the one on inclusion. And for us, often again, as I said, diversity and inclusion, I get talked about as one and the same, and they're not. So there are three key elements in our definition of inclusion. One is that people have a sense of belonging and agency. And recently added the word agency, because agency means I have a sense of power, that I have a sense that if I bring my voice, it'll be heard. And so I don't not only feel like I belong here, that this is my organization, I feel at home here, but the agency means that, I look around and I see other people who look like me. Agency means I look around and I see things on the walls that represent my identity group. And so there's a sense of belonging in a deep way, not that I look up and all the people don't look like me, but I can see myself in all the layers of the organization. I feel respected, I feel valued, I feel seen for who I am as an individual. And so you see the breadth of what I bring and who I am, not just my social identity groups, but my experiences, my background, all of those dimensions. And there's a level, and this is where the culture comes in, of supportive energy and commitment from my leaders, from my colleagues and others, so that both individually and collectively we can do our best work. And I think this notion about if I need something from someone else, it's not like I'm too busy, don't bother me. You're in a different department, I can't give you that information. I don't have time for this. No, the organization sees our job and we see each other as providing that supportive energy. So if people are having stress, there's trauma, all those things that we're experiencing about Black Lives Matter or Indigenous populations and ways in which people feel biases exist. The supportive energy is, I want to hear you, I want to respond to it, I want to address it. So that notion, now we've been in organizations where people have felt that can be inclusive, but they can be monocultural. But our notion of inclusion is that diversity and inclusion come together. And then lastly, one of the words that we've been talking a lot about is equity. And I think we have another slide on this, Vera, if you just move to the next slide. Equity, I love this picture because I think it says it all. Many people confuse equity and equality. Equity ensures that everyone has access to what they need to do their best work. And it acknowledges that there are historical barriers and imbalances that we have to address. So if we look at the picture on the left, equality would be everybody the same. And when we look at the picture on the right, equity means we give those young people what they need to be able to see over the fence. It differentiates, it means we have to do different strategies. It means understanding different barriers that the child in the wheelchair might have versus the child who's tall. And so it's really understanding what do people need. And so really wanting to just kind of highlight that compliance, diversity, inclusion, and equity all are important, and they all take different strategies. So I'm going to leave it there. I know there was a lot there, but hopefully that lays some foundation for us in terms of thinking about these definitions. So Vera, if you move to our next slide, please. And Fred.
We want to talk about social identity groups and kind of how we navigate the world and who's on Earth. I'm aware of how fast we're going, so I want to apologize for that in advance, but we like to give out a lot of content so people have a lot of angles and different ways of looking at things. And if you want to pursue any of these things, we have written articles about most of these things. We can always send you an article, so if you're interested in that, let us know. But we want to share with you as much as we can. We have you for a few minutes. We want to take advantage of it. Social identity groups. So there's lots of social identity groups, ways in which people identify themselves or the way they were born that puts them in a group that they're identified with. And in this model, was created for some friends of ours at the University of Massachusetts, talks about some of the social identities that are kind of most off. We sometimes title this differences that make a difference. So these are the social identity groups that make a difference in people's lives, either inside out, how I experience myself, or outside in. So every identity that I have, I don't carry as a signpost or a billboard as I walk through the world, but people will identify it. Every time I walk down the street, I'm not thinking, I'm a black man walking down the street, I'm a black man walking down the street, I'm a black man walking down the street. But when I walk down the street and somebody, hesitates or crosses the street or gets that real look of fright on their face, then I go, what the hell happened? Why are they, oh, it's that black thing. So I may not be carrying it all the time, any of those identities that I have, but the world will often remind me of my identity, especially some more than others. So as we talk about identities, I may not see it as a negative thing at all. If I died and came back, I would come back as a black man. So I see that as something I would always want to have. I love being an African-American man. And yet there's some organizational and societal context to that have negative implications. So I'm just going to go through these relatively quickly and then give you a chance to go to some small groups and talk about it. But there's identity around age. And in each one of these boxes, there's a one up and one down. In each one of these boxes, there's a group that has more privilege than others in that group. And so if we had more time, I would kind of go through them and have you identify in your location, in your section of the world, in your organization, which ones are one up and one down. But for now, I'm just kind of go through them and just give you my biased view of what's one up and one down right now, which might not be correct for where you are. It might not be correct for all the way the world is right now. But I would ask you if you can have that old-fashioned thing called a piece of paper. If you would have a piece of paper or somewhere where you can make some notes as we're going through this, that would be very, very helpful. So if you do that, it's going to be hard to memorize all these. So if you could jot it down. I should have said that at the very beginning so you could have run and got some already. So around age, who's one up and who is that one down? As you think about the country that you're in, who's one up, who's one down around age? Sorry about the siren going through in New York City. As we think about our organization, who's one up and who's one down. So, in my view of the world, You have to make a lot of noise to make traffic move side when you're going through New York City. In my view of the world, and the part of the world I am in, people age. Sometimes people will say that right now the generations, the younger generations, Generation X, Generation Y has all the power, but in many ways around age, many boomers are hanging in and still controlling organizations, or if not controlling, being senior influence in organization, sometimes on the board of organization. And also some of the younger generations, the boomers are still giving their money to the boomers, or the boomers are taking charge of the money. So if you look at one up, one down, I'm going to just one more than others, longer than others, you might say the boomers are one up. You could say, depending on your frame of reference, younger people are one up. But if you look at who's one down around generations, I always say, well, there's two things that gives you a sense of if you're one down. One is if somebody has to pass a law so you have rights. In the United States, if the Supreme Court has to pass a law so you have rights, and the Supreme Court periodically looks at your rights and decides whether you still have them, you're one down. And you also know you're one down when people can hit you. So if we look at that, or you're one down when people kind of put you away somewhere. So if you look at age around one down, it's children, young children, that we still allow in most countries people to hit children. And the issue is, where do you hit them? Did you hit them on one part of their body versus the other makes you a criminal or just a parent doing discipline? Older people, in many organizations, many countries, we warehouse older people. Where do we put them? We put them somewhere. That had major implications in the pandemic we just had. So if you say one up, you might say boomers, you might say Generation X. If you say one down, you got to put children there, you got to put the elderly there. That's true in a lot of places, not all countries, but a lot of places. Clearly true in the United States. Mental functioning and style, some of that's introvert, extrovert, and whether you're one up or one down in that. Although a lot of leaders and organizations are introverts, a lot of how they have to act is extroverted, and a lot of extroverts get recognition in organizations. Who raises their hand the fastest? I always say, if you're an extrovert and you go around and travel the world for 10 years and go there and see the place, people would say, wow, what a cool life. That's really great. If you're an introvert and stay in your house for 10 years, somebody's calling the police or social service to come after you. So just the bias around introvert and extrovert, and how society sees somebody who's an extrovert and out in the world, an introvert that doesn't go out in the world, is major. Race, color, all the things that people have been talking about racial and color differences in our society, and the one ups and one down. And again, on each one of these, just make a note for yourself. Are you in the one up group or closer to the one up group than you are to the one down group? Religious, spiritual beliefs, in many countries that plays a major part. In the United States, I don't think we'll ever have a president that says that she or he is an atheist. It's, that's just a criteria, even though most of them probably have been, and probably only go to church at one time when the cameras are there. The one up group tends to be religious, or spiritual beliefs. One down tends to be not. In other countries, we're doing work in Europe, it was almost reversed. If you were seen as very, very religious, you were seen as one down. So again, look at where you live, the region of the world you're living in, and then maybe even how it plays out in your organization. Nationality, which nationalities are up and down in those domains? Where do you fit in that? Are you in the one up nationality? Are you in the one down nationality? Single, divorced, widowed, married or parented, or children or no children? Those used to be very big many years ago. I think they're fading. But if you see some differences in the world that you live in or in the organization that you might operate in, then that would be you can identify the one ups, one down. Physical functioning and appearance. Some organizations, everybody plays golf, everybody plays tennis, or if you're up and coming, you do those things. How many people are in wheelchairs? How many people have disabilities hidden or known in the organization? Or where are they in the organization? How does that manifest itself? How are people experienced in the community that you are in? If they have disabilities, what does that mean? Or if different physical abilities or different physical functioning. Sexual orientation, again, who's up, who's down, what do you see yourself? Who do you see as the one down in that domain? Gender identity, the same thing. Who do you see one up? Who do you see one down? Where do you put yourself? And it's not how you feel about yourself. Like I said, I'm an African-American man. I would put myself one up around race. But in the United States, I'm not one up around race. Being old helps me some. If I was a younger white man, younger black man, I'd be more at risk than an older black man. But still, I would say as a black man in the United States, I'm in the one down thing, even though I see myself in that one up. So as you're looking at these, don't do your personal feelings about self, but what happens on a societal basis, or when you're in a group moving through Earth. Ethnicity, inside of each of our racial color identities, there are ethnicities inside of it. So Northern Italian and Southern Italian. A lot of people have talked about historically Southern Italians or darker get more crap in many ways than Northern Italians. So how that play out around ethnicity. Language, what language do you speak? What language is okay and not okay? Which language is one up and one down in the community you're in or in the organization you're in? Education, how does that play out in the organization and where you are on that? Class is a funny dynamic in most organizations and in most countries. But where do you see yourself on the class spectrum? And what would you see as one up and one down around that? And then the blank circle is where, this is not all inclusive. There are other dimensions of difference. And for people to identify, that could be a child of alcoholic parents. It could be a rape survivor. It could be post-traumatic stress from being at war or some other traumatic experience. So whatever that. So if you haven't, or if you can, just indicate in at least a few of the boxes where you are one up and one down. And that says a lot. Go back to the diagram one more time. That says a lot about what happens as you walk through the world. Again, you may very well not see yourself as a down, but you may be one down in the larger society or community context. And what does that mean? What does that mean when you and others are together? What does that mean as you interact with the world? Let me just stop there for a second and just hear two comments. Judith, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I always think about how I see myself is not necessarily how the world sees me. And I think this is one of the things about social identity groups is really, I may see myself as, very empowered, et cetera, with all my identities, but that's not how the world may experience me or project onto me. And so we're trying to really kind of separate those two. So.
And some of this is understanding who I am and how I see myself, how the world treats me, how I interact, and what am I carrying around any of these identities as it relates to others, and how broad is my network or my learning around some of the other identities that in the same box or different boxes. So I have a perspective of the diversity of the world and appreciation for it. But let's hear two comments from two people. Makes sense, doesn't make sense. Let's hear two comments, and then we're going to give you a chance to talk about this. Quickly.
I guess I'll go again.
Hi, Tammy.
Thank you.
So what question exactly would you like us to answer? Like how we perceive these?
Yeah, your reaction to what I just said and how I've described this, and kind of anything that stands out for you as you
So from moving around a lot, I noticed that there's a lot of similarities and differences from one place to the other. But so these ups and downs actually change a lot depending on where we're at. So that helps to put in perspective how we perceive ourselves, because you have to decide for yourself at some point what that +1 or -1 is, and then you have to empower yourself with those words and with that understanding and help other people and detect other people that are going through similar things and are maybe trapped within that because they haven't moved around and they haven't seen that there are other ways to look at it. And that, just because like I mentioned I have dissociative identity, I didn't say disorder because it depends on where in the world you are and how you look at that. It might be an advantage, it might be a disadvantage. It comes from a bad place, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a handicap. So I find that interesting to like say like one up, one down, but it really has to be put in context of exactly where you're at.
Totally. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's have one more comment for someone, please.
I don't mind commenting. Just to say, I really agree with what Tammy shared. I've had a chance to do quite a bit of traveling in my life and my experience, and so there are situations in my current context. I look at it and I would tick off and say, as a white male, I've had so many advantages in my life. I've been a part of so many, and yet there are times when I was traveling, for example, in the Middle East, where all of a sudden I was not the dominant group and I did not speak the language. And what an incredible experience it is actually to suddenly feel, you know, what so many people feel every day in my culture and in my life. And I would just say that looking at this helps me to put into perspective that experience of what it is to feel like the other, to feel different. So very, very good visual.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate all that. It's, you know, we do a lot of work with a lot of organizations, and almost always the person that has the most insight to themselves and to the diversity of the world are people who have traveled outside their home country. Again and again and again, people who haven't traveled or seen the world, or even in their home country stayed kind of insular, have a very narrow view of the world. And people who have traveled in many countries, just like you said, David, have had the experience, and that gives them a context that is rich with the possibility of them understanding others and being empathetic towards others, but also being change agents. Thanks for your comment. Okay, unless somebody else has something hot, I'm going to move us. Okay, so we're going to put you in small groups again. How is diversity showing up in your life and or impacting your life? Which two differences are easiest for you to address, engage with? Which two differences are hardest, challenging for you to address, engage with? Or which you are least familiar with? Why don't y'all start with question number 3? Because I want to make sure you get to that. Start with 3, and then you can work yourself to 1 and 2 or 2 and 1. But start with number 3. We're going to put you in groups again and let you chat about it, talking about the social identity groups and where you are and some of those ups and downs that you may have identified. Okay, Vera. Welcome back. So we want to hear from just a couple of people, just thoughts, reflections coming out of that, or differences that are challenging for you, or anything else you want to share. Then we have one more model we want to share with you before we move to our closing. So we'll keep moving right along, but I'd like to hear from 2 people. If you haven't spoken already, that's great. But if nobody talks and you've spoken, speak again. So
I personally would love to hear from Daniel. She got cut off before at the end of the breakout, if she's willing to tell us what she thinks is left off the list that you had showed us.
please.
There we go. Thank you. I find these lists interesting and useful as a starting point, but I always am left thinking about all of the different dimensions of diversity and dimensions of identity that are not on the list.
Yeah.
And what I find powerful is discussing the access to power connected to all those dimensions of diversity. And that's what people have a harder time letting go of. You know, theoretically, we should all have the same access to power, but what does that mean in concrete action? And that's where I find the blockages are for most of us.
Right. And that's why the equity, equality conversation is so critical. And getting clear about the one up, one down, that when you're one down, that it's very hard to come to that. You're actually seen as the wrong person to be talking to power. How about one more comment before we move on? Quickly.
I would, oh, go ahead.
2 people, we'll hear you both. Want somebody to go first, Carl?
Yeah, I'll make it short. So I think it would be like throughout my life as an immigrant and now as a Canadian citizen, I think it changed. It depends like at what stage you are in life and when did you arrive and how the society is evolving as well. So I think that's what it's important to mention, like where are you and what stage and what are you doing and how much influence are you having on that, because sometimes it's also a mindset. Like if I come with a mindset all these years, I'm an immigrant, then maybe that mindset is on me, not on also the society. So I think it's important we discuss these issues because they are present, but I think we also need to see how are we looking at them and how is our identity being influenced by the mindset.
I like that. And how much we inhale of that toxic world out there related to workplaces where people identify, we're not one down, but people identify us and one down and treat us that way. And Susie?
I had started talking at the same time as
sorry.
Carla. I just something that might seem obvious, but in the two last questions 2 and 3, what's easiest and hardest to engage with, it became rather like emphasized that really the easiest and the hardest is really based on how familiar we are with each particular. So if we are in the mental health, or in the race, or that's their or particular, that we feel that we're part of that one down, then it becomes familiar and becomes easy to engage with. So in this bipolarized type of environment that we're at, we tend to be fighting against each other. I'm vegan, you have to eat like me, you have to think this way or whatnot. Or I believe in this. And instead, what we probably should be doing is trying to familiarize people and making it accessible to them in that same equity wise, right? To help them engage with our familiar environment that seems so obvious to us, in order for it to be easier for them too. Otherwise, change won't happen.
I love that. And, in the, kind of the history of some of these things, it's a lot easier to look down on somebody you don't know or don't have any association with, or a group that you don't think and demonize them. And often people change when they have the interaction. And when they get to know one another and feel like, oh, I thought they were awful, awful people, but I like this one. So how do we get people the exposure that they need so they can move out of the mythology that they're carrying and the fears they're carrying and move to the reality that people are people and we may be different and we're great too. And how do we have people have that exposure? That's just a key part of the process. I'm going to move us. We have one more model we want to share with you and get you hopefully back to small groups one last time. And then just wrap up talking about future parts of the series that will be happening. So this is a model that was created several years ago, and Judith and I have worked a lot on it. It's the path to inclusion. And it really talks about how do we go from being an exclusive club to moving to an inclusive organization. And so the exclusive club is a club where people are excluded because of their difference. And go to the next slide. Excluded because of their difference. And so because of their difference, they're kept out. Sometimes exclusive club has signs up. X group stay out. X group cannot, live here, sleep here, work here, live here, walk down the street here, et cetera, et cetera. And the signs are out. The passive club, the signs are down. But the behaviors and the exclusiveness of it is still in existence. But it's passive. It's not, we like everybody and we only really like people like us. So the passive club is in many, many, many places. And it's like, oh yeah, everybody's okay. But we, in the entrance to our building, if you're in a wheelchair, you can't even get in. Or if you go into the lobby, you can't get out of the lobby. Oh yeah, we like everybody, but somehow in our orchestra, we just seem to only find men that are good musicians. So it's those things that happen where they even have the vocabulary and the language of diversity, but the reality of we only want certain types of people. The next phase of this path that goes from exclusive club down is when symbolic difference. So this is an organizational change model. Many organizations start off as exclusive club, family businesses, and they grow into larger enterprises sometimes. So that's always a family member, you're okay. If you're not a family member, we don't know if we can trust you. The passive club, I start, take that sign down, don't have that limitation, but we're still acting out of those behaviors. Symbolic difference is when those first trailblazers come into the organization that are different from the original people or the founders of the people. And that's a hard job. Trailblazer is a very difficult job. Judith's going to talk some about aspects of trailblazers. Because you have to have a first, you're going to have an only. How does that person survive and what is that person carrying?
Vera, why don't you move us to so I'm going to talk about these 7 jobs of the trailblazers. And I think what happens very often for that first or the only, they really, many of them don't survive. And so they've got at least 7 jobs. We've talked about more. I think it's really important to the organization to understand that first person has all these jobs, because we often downgrade their performance and we don't recognize the totality of what they're bringing to the organization. So one, they have to fit into the organization and its culture. You know, they've got to be able to fit into that club and really be able to only symbolically bring whatever difference they have. They have to do their job exceedingly well, and they're constantly proving themselves. You know, we talk about how women have to work twice as hard to be able to be seen as good as men, right? Or people of color, BIPOC folks have to really work twice as hard to be seen in terms of being competent. They also get to be the voice of their identity group. So they get to be that representative on the diversity councils. They get to be in the spotlight. They get to be the person that everybody goes to when there's a diversity question. And so they really become that voice and representative of their group, even if they only an N of 1. They have to also make other people who are different from themselves feel comfortable. So, you know, I remember there was a woman executive that we worked with who talked about being the only woman in the executive team, and she'd have to smoke cigars with the guys in order for them to feel comfortable. So, you know, it was kind of like she was fitting into their culture and in many ways had given up the things that were important to her. You also have to spend a lot of time educating others, you know, questions people have about your identity group and kind of responding to that. During Black Lives Matter and George Floyd's murder and all of that was happening, you know, being asked a lot of questions of Black colleagues in terms of what's going on, how do you feel, or all of those things. When Fred always talks about a manager never talked to the Black people about how they're feeling in the organization. Now all of a sudden all those questions come. They also get to be a mentor to others in their identity group. They're being asked to recruit, they're asked to do outreach, they're asking to take on all those other functions, which are not their functions within the organization. And then underlying all of this is this constant questioning of whether their job was attained because of competence or because of their difference. Were they hired just because we wanted one of those, or because they really were competent? And so there's often that questioning and undergirding of the individual who's a trailblazer. So what's really important about this is to recognize when you hire somebody, how do you recognize and mitigate against the fact that they've got all these other jobs besides just doing their job, when their colleagues who are part of the norm just get to do their job and get evaluated on this. The trailblazers getting evaluated on how well they've done their job, number 2, and all these other dimensions. And so we really feel like this is an important part of understanding that path to inclusion in terms of what are we putting on the person who's different in the organization. And then I'll turn it back to Fred to kind of finish the model and just kind of understand that.
All the concepts we're talking about are in articles, as I said before, and I think they're all going to be sent out to you as part of the packet coming out of this session. Moving down the path is critical mass, when you start having enough people who are different than the traditional group and their allies. Critical mass allies. No war or effort or change has ever happened with just the primary group involved. Allies have always been essential to societal change, world change, organizational change. And that period of transformation, that red area, the checkerboard area there, is where things get really tough. Because then it's like, okay, it looks like things are going to change around here. And some people are saying we need to change it faster. And there are other people who are saying this is going too fast. Let's go back to the way it was. It was so good before. Why are we living in this world? Why is it so crazy? I don't even know what the rules are. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to call people. Let's go back to a place where everything makes sense. This is crazy world. And there are others saying, hey, we got to keep going. We have to make this happen. That's why it's a path going forward. If you look at that blue area, there's a lot of judging around an exclusive club and a passive club, a symbolic difference, system and culture bias, and really support the dominance of one culture, one group, one style. And then you have that tolerance of difference, which is very low in the passive club area spot, if you look straight above that. And then the tolerance gets larger and larger as you move to critical mass. And then as we move further down the path, we don't want tolerance. We don't want somebody tolerating somebody. We want somebody joining somebody. And so the systems and the culture are based on the added value of difference and culture, different cultures, styles, and groups. And so from that passive club, we start to get to a welcoming organization that people greet you and at least acknowledge your presence. So that requires new mindsets and new behaviors, new competencies, new capabilities, new ways of interacting, new ways of operating. That's the organizational shift. That's the organizational culture shift. People want to say, let's be more inclusive, let's be more diverse, let's have equity, but let's not change any of our systems and processes. Wrong. You have to change the system and processes because those are there to support what is and has been. You might even have to change your value statement. You might have to change some other core parts of the organization because those things support the past and a more monoculture organization. Then you get to affirming when it's not just my name and I'm welcome, but I'm feeling more involved and I feel appreciated for kind of all of who I am. And then we got inclusive organization, and Judith gave you a definition of that. And then we were in that green area of really joining. So that's a model that we see that moves an organization. It could be move a community from being that exclusive club to that inclusive organization. It's like the developmental process of a human being. You know, you got to crawl before you walk. You got to walk before you run. Organizations have to go this. When they try to skip stages of this, all it does is create a setback and probably sacrifice some people along the way. So again, we'll send you this article, but it really speaks to the development process that we use with all our clients. We can assess where clients are and assess what the next steps are and not try to have them jump 4 steps ahead of where they are because it causes more casualties than help. Next slide. So we're going to put you in small groups one last time. Select an organization that you are involved with or where and assess where they are along the path. Or if not, just can talk about the path model. What is one thing that you and or others can do to move the organization further along the path? So what's a strategy or a tactic that might be helpful? We're going to put you back in the same groups you were in before and let you just have short time, 6 minutes to kind of talk about your reaction to the path model, where you see your organization on the path, and what's one thing that can happen that would help your organization or your community or any aspect of your life move along the path. Okay, we'll move now. Hello, welcome back. It's so lonely when y'all go away. I'm glad you come back. Welcome back. We're gonna hear from just 4 people, whatever you wanna say. It could be about the path model or the group you just talked about or anything else we've talked about. But let's hear from 4 people. Judith's gonna talk a little bit about some future stuff that we're involved in. And then we'll close off with Marilyn closing out with some things that this process, the series is involved in. So let's hear from 4 people. Let's do it. You don't have to talk quickly, but let's select ourselves quickly. So let's have 4 people.
How you doing, Fred? Hi, Judy. So our group was really excited to talk about our organization. So we had 3 people from the academia world, and they just took charge. They really went head on and started addressing their diversity challenges, which was awesome. And I wish I had their courage and their grit. I'm actually with MVP Healthcare, and we are at the budding stages of the D&I program, and I probably consider myself a trailblazer a little bit, and I put in chat the question like, how do I tip the critical mass? Because there's a lot of work to be done, and I chair one of the employee resource groups and advocate for my team, which is primarily people of color and I'm a natural citizen myself, so I'm trying to tell our story as much as I can, but I feel like I need a little bit of a push, a jump, and more allies in the organization in order for us to go into the other side. So I feel like we're in that passive club, not because, we're mean and, we don't want to learn. I think there is a lot of education needs to be done, but we need more allies. So that's where I feel like we're at.
I love it. I love it. So you have allies on the screen with you. So there's people here to connect with. And then I hear you saying you want allies inside your organization. But one of the beauties of these things is you start meeting kindred spirits and then start figuring out how we can connect, because nobody can do this alone. Nobody. Let's hear from two more people.
I'd like to say something. I think, well, I'm a project manager for a group, and we have new arrivals, and I focus on the person, on their capabilities according to the job description that we're hiring, and when I introduce these people to the group, I don't introduce, oh, this is so and so from China. I just say, this is so and so. She's an engineer. She worked on the Yangtze River project in China, and she can talk about it if she wants to. And, just focusing on why we hired this person, not because she's from an ethnic group, just because she's her and she's got the capabilities to do it.
I love it.
And then when she's in the group, we have 8 new people. So when they integrate into the group, I ask them individually, we would like to learn more about where you're from and not the reason why you came to Canada, because they're most of the stories are sad. So we don't want them to we want them to talk about, what they want to share with us, not what their sad story about why they immigrated. So basically that's it. Just
Thank you.
and they have, every week we have a group that we meet once a week, and then we ask them, what expression did you learn in slang language this week? So they tell us, and we have a good laugh.
That could be scary.
It is.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. One more person, one more comment.
I would just say one thing. One of the most important lessons I learned about inclusion, I watched a TED Talk, and the lady that was giving the TED Talk said, inclusion, we've got to get beyond thinking we're moving over to make room for people in the picture. And we've got to recognize the fact that they should have been in the picture from the beginning. And to me, that was just a powerful statement that I wanted to share.
That's great, David.
So I'm going to make a last comment, then Judith, and then Marilyn. So I just want to thank everybody. Y'all have been wonderful. I've had a very, very long day, started at like 5 a.m. So I'm really appreciative of you and your voices and your enthusiasm. And we're going to be involved in more of these. And I hope I see you there, and keep up the good work and keep being you in this world. The world needs you.
I love it. Thanks, Fred. And thanks, everyone. I'm really struck by the power of when we share our stories and we share our knowledge with each other. So we talked a little bit about this before. I'm just being mindful of time. If you can join us, either for the Human Interaction Lab, these 2 labs are going to be run simultaneously, or the Developing the Organizational Personal Self, which is a more advanced lab. We'd love to have you join us. And these kinds of issues will be part of this, as well as looking at ourselves individually and who we are in the world. So those are coming up in May in 2022. And Marilyn, I will move it over to you.
Thank you. I would just want to say, wow, that was such an engaging presentation. So hi, I'm Marilyn. I'm with the Center for Human Relations and Community Studies. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this first webinar in the Being Your Best Self series. On behalf of the center, I'd like to give a big thanks to Fred and Judith. We so appreciate them generously sharing their time and vast wisdom and experience with us today. So let me take this opportunity here to let you know about the upcoming webinars in this series for this winter. The second one, titled 4 Keys for Teamwork and Collaboration, taking place January 20th with Fred Miller and Yabom Gilpin Jackson. And the third one in the series, titled Creating Interaction Safety, taking place in February, dates to be determined, with Fred Miller and Judith Katz. So as we said earlier, we will be sending you an email, a follow-up email with all of the slides and the articles that were mentioned today, as well as the link to the recording. More information on the webinars and the labs, which we are very excited to be offering in the spring, God willing, will be available on our website, chrcs.concordia.ca. So I'll just wrap up by saying thank you again for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
Take care, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It was great to be with y'all.